Hey, thanks for joining us and welcome back from that short break after looking at the stock market, explaining some of the new development within the stock market of Nigeria. We are now for the discussion segment where Mr. Ogunje will be joining me. Mr. Ogunje also happened to be our colleague in the meeting before and has trained into full-time investment banking expert and management. So he'll be joining us to look at startup and unlocking Nigerian economy. You know, one of the good things about startup is that it has become an avenue whereby our young ones are now taking up. Not just the ones that have been able to establish themselves like Flute Waiver, Money Point, OPay, and the rest of them in the fintech aspect. Also seeing young Nigerians, diverting and going into the diversification of the economy at the agro level, logistic, transportation level in terms of the startup ecosystem. You could also recall that I think a week ago, I discussed startup with Theodora to also explain the incubation aspect of startup. We're looking at the financial aspect of startup, how they can get money, how they can use their money, instructively to ensure that they are not just getting the money from somewhere, putting in a business that will not grow, but they will put in a business that will grow. Let us join Mr. Segun. Mr. Segun, a very good day to you.
Thank you very much, my brother.
All right, so let's get down to the discussion of today. But first and foremost, you must have read about CBN maintaining MPR rate. What is your reaction to that?
Well, CBN has to do what it's created to do, which is ensuring that the economy is well managed in terms of putting a lot of things together, like inflation, like exchange rate, and all of those. So because of all of those, like competing objectives, it's almost imperative for CBN to hold rates in the corridor where they think they'll be able to maintain all of these variables to the betterment of the Nigerian economy. So I think it was proper for them to hold MPR at that level.
Exactly. But going about the issue that bank executive, even though they didn't come out to say it outrightly, bank executive, MD of bank, are now talking to third party and saying that the cash reserve ratio should be reduced from that 50% that it is today. What's your own thought about it? Talking about the 50% cash reserve ratio, that bank executives are saying, please CBN, reduce this 50%.
So I believe that the CBN follows trend. The CBN is a regulatory body that has to take decisions based on data, on trend, on things that are happening. And of course, we have to also understand that it is not likely that the CBN and the banks will be on the same page in everything that the CBN is doing. So it's normal for the banks to want to have more money in their till to be able to do all of the things that they are doing, whereas the CBN also has the mandate to manage things and make sure that we do not misbehave. So whether directly or through third parties, I do not think the banks will want to go against what the CBN thinks is the appropriate rate at this time.
Exactly. So let's now get into the discussions proper. Startup. Mr. Segun, you have been with them. You have done some work with startup. But from your own assessment, how do you rate Nigerian startup?
So I would say that looking at the entrepreneurship ecosystem generally, I would say Nigeria is not yet exploring or appropriating all of the benefits that should accrue from entrepreneurship. And of course, that includes startups. If we look at startups being some of these new creations that are not the traditional businesses that we all do. And in my opinion, the system, the environment is making it a bit difficult for people to be able to do business. And that's whether it's startup or any other type of business for that matter. So I would say that there is enough room for more startups, for more businesses in Nigeria, if there is a regulatory environment that can assure that businesses will be done with the right approach. People follow ethics, and we don't just do things anyhow.
Now, talking about ethics and people doing things in the right way, we have a legal framework, particularly the Startup Act in Nigeria, that will guarantee how startup can operate and the aims of ensuring that they create jobs and create employment for Nigeria, and also ensure that we have this entrepreneurship skills development in Nigeria. But what do you think are the challenges of this legal framework in Nigeria? Because you rightly pointed out the ethical aspect is there, but we need to do something critically. So what's your thought on the legal framework supporting startup in Nigeria?
Because a lot of things will have to evolve. Right now, the legal framework in Nigeria is adequate for the things that needs to be done. What I think we need to focus on primarily is enforcement. So I've worked with business owners that didn't pay salary for a couple of months, and they could operate like that for as long as they want to. In some other places, you cannot do that because you have to pay your employees at a particular time, and if you don't, you incur the wrath of regulators. So apart from the legal framework, there are structural issues also that I think government will do a lot better in trying to make sure that everybody in the ecosystem play by the rules.
Exactly. Now, when you talk about everybody in the ecosystem play by the rule, I could recall when the Startup Act was being put together at National Assembly, there was a clause that's supposed to establish Startup Commission. But a lot of Nigerians who participated at the public hearing were like, no, we don't need to duplicate offices. Let's Smidan take over the startup ecosystem of Nigeria and ensure that this works for us. But we are now seeing that there's a gap in that aspect, because Smidan, from our own understanding, it's like they are overwhelmed with the small businesses engagement in Nigeria. But we can see that the startup on their own have a very sensitive, innovative ideas that is coming up that could not be convenient or comfortable for the Smidan bureaucracy. So what's your own suggestion? Because as I speak right now, there are some people who are calling for a startup agency or commission to be established in Nigeria. But what's your thought on that?
I think in Nigeria we create agencies just too freely, too easily, without necessarily having robust discussion, robust engagement, stakeholders engagement before arriving at some of those decisions. And because planning in Nigeria, and maybe in the most part in Africa, planning is too top down, whereby we don't take planning to be bottom up, where the people that really will be the players in the field will have a good say in how things should be done. So I'm not surprised that there's a gap between what was intended and what we're now seeing on the ground. And if we're creating another agency, what difference will it make from what is presently on ground? How will the management of the agency be able to ensure that everything that needs to be done is done? The startups themselves are behaving well and the rules are followed. And so those are my concerns about creating agencies to be able to monitor the activities of the startups. It may not necessarily be that Smidan is overwhelmed. It could just be that there is a gap that we just need to fix. And data is important. I'm not sure if government is getting the right feedback. Let's even talk about if a system was set up to be able to collate feedback. that can play a significant role in retooling and making sure that we do things the right way.
Exactly. Then doing things the right way is the best way to go. But let's look at sustainability policy. I mean, policy that could help us support startup. I will give us one of those data that you are calling for, because recently it has been valued that startup capitalization in Nigeria is about 1.3 billion a month. Mr. Shegun, 1.3 billion a month is a huge money. But here we are for policy that will help us to support startup. What's your own idea around policy that could really help us to support startups, so that 1.3 billion dollar we are talking about, we could surpass it in the next 5-10 years?
I think government has a role, a significant role in creating policies. Of course, that's even the function of government in the first place. And I worry more about, especially when we're talking in terms of sustainability.
Exactly.
Because it's not just about starting a business, whether we call it startup or innovative idea, or even the traditional businesses that we do. It's not the starting, it's being able to sustain it. So if you provide funding, whatever the kind of support that we're looking at, whether it's infrastructure support, whether it's designing the appropriate systems to ensure that these businesses function, whether it's direct capital injection into some of these startups, what is the certainty that they will be able to sustain operation, and be able to earn profit sustainably? Because that's really the only guarantee for business success. Whether it doesn't matter the jurisdiction, the geography where that business is located. If you don't earn profit, you're going to go down. That's for sure. So for me, government should create policies that can support startups. They should create policies that can support entrepreneurship. But what do we do to ensure that revenue generation is key in the mind of the owners of the startups, and that they're able to operate profitably and sustainably? Those are the concerns I have about just creating policies and not minding how operations will flow to such an extent that will earn profit sustainably.
Exactly. Now, talking about profit sustainability, as you already mentioned, in recent time when you are around to talk with startup in Nigeria, you talk about beyond capital. What were you trying to message you are passing to startup at that time? Because we need to extract some of the discussion around startup getting capital. Because most times, if they get capital from federal government of Nigeria or state government of Nigeria, even from local government, there is this biased mind around when people come from government for businesses, like what we have been suffering. I mean, having issue with the anchor borrower that federal government gave out over 1.6 trillion to farmers. There's an issue with that. BOI just dropped about 200 billion to Nigerian businesses across the country, small businesses. There are issues around that. We normally have that issue. But when you are talking about beyond the capital, what do you really intend, or what kind of message are you trying to pass to startup?
Yeah, thank you so much. From the title of the book itself, when we said beyond access to capital, we're saying capital is necessary. You need capital to be able to do business. But we're saying that beyond just having money to do business, you must also understand what it takes to be able to manage business, because you can have tons of money and your business may still fail. And I've worked with entrepreneurs, with business owners in Nigeria, here in Canada, and we've seen situations whereby people have money to start their business. It's not that they're lacking in any way, but those businesses still fail. And there are a lot of things that can make businesses to fail, really, which is why knowledge is so important. People need to understand that you have to do things in a particular way to get some kind of result. And from the book, I gave instances of my experiences with business owners who did things in a particular way and got the result, and those who did the other way and they got the result that they deserve as well. So the point is, it's not just about getting capital. You have rightly said that government gave money through the Anchor Borrower Scheme, and CBN has been giving business capital to a lot of institutions, a lot of businesses. The issue is, what do you do with money? I will try to emphasize in that book to say it's not about access to capital, it's about management of finance. So how are people managing the funding? You have a startup that probably has not even earned revenue in whatever form, but your expenses are in US dollars, and you are racking up expenses, and the only way that can make you make profit is if your cost is less than your revenue. It's as simple as that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And one thing, Mr. Shegun, why I asked you this question was that a week ago I had a startup interest who came on my show, and she gave a vivid experience of what they are having when they are asking youth to go into startup. And when they, she shared an experience with me and said there was a time they had over 125 startups that came to apply to be trained. But guess what? The majority of those people that came were interested in what would be their packages. You know, the kit package they normally give them when they are going. And she was a little bit, I mean, not too comfortable with that. And the question I put forward was that, what did you guys tell them when they came in? And what did you guys propose to them when they also came in? And why I'm pushing this question back to you is that when we want to talk about startup, the one thing that comes to every young Nigerian mind is that they're going to give us money to go and start business. And in the business they want to go help give us money to go and start, we already have economic deficits, structural economic deficit. Power, goodwill are all missing. Mr. Shegun, how can we bring this to the understanding of our youth who we are encouraging to go into startups, so that once they get such money, they will not give the excuses that there was no power, I have to go and buy a generator, I have to go and buy food, and those are the things that consume the money given to them at start capital for the businesses.
Yeah, you just kind of hit the nail on the head. It's people, a lot of people, maybe not all, to be fair, and I can't give a particular percentage of that would be now, because that has to be backed up by research.
Exactly.
But you see, from my experience with business owners, with younger people that I relate with the situation of our economy in Nigeria and all of that, people go into business. A lot of people go into business because they cannot find job. You know, so it's not that really have that business mindset to want to do business and even to be successful at it. They just want money, right? So a young guy or a young lady gets out of the university or the polytechnic, searching for a job for quite a long time, and he's not able to find one. He feels, so if they announce that there's going to be a startup training somewhere, he's going to go to the place. Whether he truly wants to do business or not is another issue. And that's why we will need to categorize individuals into those that really they genuinely want to do business. And honestly, it is something that government has to put a lot of effort into, to make sure that we're not just focusing on startups, you know, the way we like the innovation side of things, to say developing an app and all of these STEM kind of things. We have to support the entire entrepreneurship system from the grassroots. Communities can own businesses. It doesn't have to be individuals. In Nigeria, I think only to the level of state governments. It's where we have government having businesses or having interest in businesses. Local government should have businesses. Communities should have businesses. There should be community-owned businesses. So if we create that wide coverage of entrepreneurship activities, maybe, just maybe, we're going to be able to find individuals who are truly and genuinely interested in business, starting businesses, not just wanting the next available cash to be able to pay their bills and do all of those. And there has to be a lot of plans in place to also make sure that people answer for the wrong that they do. If people feel that I can take this money and do whatever I like with it, and they're not going to be held accountable, then a lot of people will continue to toe that line, to toe that path, to follow their path. But if people misbehave like that, and there's a system that can deal with those kind of offenses, then maybe people will really sit down. There's been too much of bad loans, people not just being alive to their responsibilities to be able to pay back whatever they took from financiers. And this is really becoming a terrible thing that's going to dry up business capital. So I agree with you.
Exactly. Now, talking about business capital, and even though you have made assertion around government doing this, government doing that, let's also draw the attention of private sector initiative. Talking particularly on of effective partnership and collaboration. What's your thought about a startup having partnership, collaboration, even though you mentioned community, businesses, and the rest? On the part of partnership and collaboration, what's your thought on that for startup?
So, you see, most of the time, we want to do things alone because we've built some castles in the air. We have an idea of how many millions of dollars that we want to make. Whether it's possible to even attain 10% of that kind of projection is another issue. So we have the culture of just wanting to own things alone, But ordinarily, if a genuine business interest that is arising from doing good business planning, and I'm not talking of business planning just for the purpose of going to the bank to look for money. Read business plan that tells you this is what we really need to be able to do X volume to be able to make revenue and all of those. When you see that you are not likely to be able to raise that kind of funding alone, of course, common sense would dictate that you need to partner with people. You need to bring a lot of people on board, maybe 3 or 4, and all of those things. And again, depending on the kind of business, sometimes you may need some other people to play in another segment of the value chain. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Exactly. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So I agree with you that people don't embrace partnership as they do just because of that mind that they already have that, okay, this is the amount of money I'm going to make from this. And that's the thing. It's just about money. Whether they're even going to be profitable enough to attain that level is a different thing. And we make that point very clear in the book that I just launched about the difference between liquidity and profitability. You can be liquid and not be profitable. You will be seeing the cash, it may not be yours. And what people do most of the time, even when they raise funding from a VC, from venture capitalists, or they borrow money from the bank, they start to spend the money as if on personal things that do not even relate to the business. That's part of the issues that we're having. People don't want to. To do business it entails some level of discipline. It is not just a way to run away from your 9 to 5, from normal employment. In fact, you need to do more work being an entrepreneur that you ordinarily would do if you're in employment. I can tell you that for sure.
Exactly. Now you're talking about people running from 9 to 5. Most startup guys that I've come across, they will earlier tell you that I have to dump my 9 and jump into startup. But Mr. Shego, let's leave that and still take another very interesting aspect of our discussion today. You know, in recent time, a data came out from one of the leading research institutions here in Nigeria and said that very soon, African startup will hit over 300 billion. And, you know, Nigeria is playing a good role in that. We are among the top 4 of the startup capital investment destination in Africa, and particularly in our fintech area. I can mention, although I don't even need to mention them. You know them. The Flute Waiver of this world, the OPay of this world, the Money Point. These are guys doing very well in the fintech. But questions are being asked. How can we also build, start up integrity and be building successful businesses? You know, beyond the fintech, we have the agro-tech, we have the earth tech, we have the transport tech. How can we also tap into there? Because everybody is looking at, let me do an app and begin to collect money from people. People can begin to send money here, receive money here. How can we go beyond that?
So I think it's going to be a bit challenging because at the root of some of these things we're discussing is greed. You know, people are just greedy. It really doesn't matter to a lot of people how they get money. They just want to get money. Whether they swindle somebody to be able to get that money, some can even go to the extent of eliminating other people just to be able to get money. So what we're talking about is value system, our values. How do we see money? How do we see other people? Will I be comfortable to take what does not belong to me and just be happy with it, irrespective of how the other person feels? So it's going to take some strong, continuous national orientation program to get us into that place where people will not just be mindful of money. And I wouldn't, as much as it's not a desirable thing, but when you see our environment and how people flaunt wealth, irrespective of how they get it, politicians, civil servants, in fact, less of business people flaunt wealth like the other people who you probably cannot even attest to the sources of their wealth. So, and we take that to be instrument of oppression. Sometimes the average person wants to prove that he's better than the other person, and by oppressing and making sure that I'll deal with this person, kind of a thing, as we say in our parlance. So yeah, it's a value thing that we need to work on, and I think government has a lot of role, and NGOs will have a lot of roles to play in this as well. But you're really very correct that the problem is that people are not interested in business; they are just interested in money, and that's a strong point we try to make in the book as well.
Exactly. Now, talking about trying to encourage people to go into startup and also ensuring that they do it rightly, because apart from just helping people to understand that where you will get the money to start your business, we also need to encourage people how to have integrity. Mr. Shegun, on your part, you know, what advice do you have for our young Nigerians? I have to say this. Although you are part of it, you have been here, you have seen it, you have written about it, you have talked about it. You can see the passionate that Nigerian youth have to go into startup. But what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, you just mentioned the word integrity. That's the only thing that can help us to cure all of these ills, all of these terrible things happening with business failures and all of that. And integrity, I don't know, it's not something that can be taught. It's what people will have to embrace. You know, is what is being fair to others. Is making sure that you don't take what does not belong to you. Whether so like in audit, because I've been in audit a little bit, we say fraud happens when opportunity meets intention. So people, yeah, exactly. If the opportunity is there, but you don't have the intention, of course, you close all of the gaps that may exist. I've worked in places where there has been like zero internal control. And what I try to do in those kind of situations is I try to strengthen a system that is weak. But when opportunities are created for people with intention to do these nefarious kind of things, they just have a field day. So businesses, government will have to create strong internal control around their businesses to make sure that people with terrible intentions are not able to carry out their enterprise, if you get what I mean.
Exactly.
Now, that's what I mean by integrity cannot be taught. We just have to create systems and structures that can at least limit the ability of people to be able to do all of those terrible things that they do.
Exactly. Mr. Segun, I can't thank you enough for coming on it. All the way from Manitoba, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, you are giving us, a piece of one of your valuable advice, as an investment banker, a stock. I didn't even have the opportunity to ask you a question about Nigerian stock market, but I know we'll definitely create opportunity so that we can talk about Nigerian stock market with you. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I will say your advice.
Thanks for having me.
All right, your advice, your submission are quite interesting. And I know of our youth who are watching, and I will definitely pick one or two things from you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Bye.
All right, sir.